Hey, how's it going? In this video, we're going to talk about the basics of AWS IAM or Identity Access Management. This is crucial if you're responsible for securing cloud infrastructure in AWS, or you just need to know what your engineers are doing in the cloud. All right, so this is the roadmap that we're going to use for this video. So we're going to start out talking about what IAM or Identity Access and Management is in AWS Cloud. So according to AWS, IAM or Identity Access Management is a web service that allows you to control access to AWS resources. It allows you to centrally manage permissions. So essentially what it allows you to do is control who can log into your cloud environment and what they have access to. If you've ever heard of Active Directory in Windows environments, it's basically the same kind of thing where you can centrally manage a lot of the access and the permissions that you need to control. Now let's talk about the benefits of IAM and why it matters. Using AWS IAM is extremely important for several reasons. Now the first reason is for security and compliance. AWS IAM gives you fine-grained access control of your cloud environment. So you can centrally manage users and groups, the permissions that allow or deny those users to access different AWS resources. So that's really important. This ensures that only the authorized users that you want to have access are going to have access to your environment. The other reason is for compliance requirements. So if you've ever been in different industries or companies or anything like that, there are all kinds of different compliance requirements that are out there. And by using IAM, you can control access related to those control environments or those control requirements, and you can centrally log everything that happens. That's really important if you want to review activities or anything that's happened in your control or your cloud environment. Another key benefit is resource management. So think about this. You might have a lot of different AWS accounts and you want to centrally manage or centrally control all that access in one spot for all those different accounts. With IAM, you can do that. It's really easy. They've made it so beneficial and so easy to do in AWS. You can also delegate permissions using IAM roles and policies, so you can ensure that whoever needs access is going to have the necessary things that they need to do that job or do that function, and they're not going to have a bunch of other things because you can't granularly control it. So this is also something that we call least privilege in security, and you might have heard about that before if you've studied any kind of security certification or security best practices. The third benefit is operational efficiency. So IAM allows you to automatically or use automated processes to provision users, meaning you're onboarding them, giving them access, or you can deprovision users, reducing the risk overall of any kind of human error. One of the things that we always see, or a potential issue with these manual processes, is you may not grant the right access or the right permissions. You might click the wrong button, you might click the wrong group. Whatever it is, that's a huge issue. So if you can automate that with something like AWS IAM, that's a whole lot better than doing it manually. With IAM, you can easily manage permissions and roles, streamlining the whole process of adding or removing access or users in your cloud environment. The fourth benefit is scalability and flexibility. Now, as an organization grows, they might not just stick with one account. When we think about AWS and just starting out a company in the cloud, something like that, you're going to create a single account. As you grow, you might get 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 AWS accounts. Who knows, right? It could grow to infinite, I guess, but you're going to grow over time and you're going to need a lot of accounts. You're going to need a centralized way to manage a lot of that stuff across all of those accounts. So that's what IAM is very helpful for. IAM can control all that access and those permissions across all those different accounts. Additionally, with granular permissions, you can actually give very few permissions based on the exact service that somebody's going to use. So for instance, if you're using S3 or S3 buckets, you might only want to allow read-only permissions and not complete access or full control of those buckets. The fifth and final major benefit of IAM that we're going to cover in this video is auditing and monitoring. Now with AWS IAM, it integrates with AWS CloudTrail to log all API requests, providing a detailed audit trail for security analysis and compliance auditing. You can monitor and track all IAM activity to ensure compliance with internal policies and external regulations. By leveraging AWS IAM, organizations can enhance their security posture, manage resources more efficiently, and ensure compliance with industry standards and regulations. Now let's shift gears and talk about users and groups within IAM. When you first create your AWS account, you're creating something called a root user, just like when you're installing an operating system. That root user can do anything in your AWS account, so you only want to use it for the initial setup. That means when you create an AWS account, you need at least one additional user account for management. You also want to carefully safeguard those root login credentials because you always want to have access to your account if you need it or you get locked out or something. Within IAM, you can create both user accounts and groups where you can add users just like you would in an operating system. IAM also allows identity federation if you want to connect it with something like Active Directory and use existing login credentials. With an AWS account, there's 3 different access ways that you want to protect with AWS IAM. The first one's AWS CLI, so that's the command line interface. There's AWS SDKs, or software development kits, and there's the AWS Management Console, which is basically the GUI, so if you go onto your web browser and you log into the AWS website. By default, all IAM accounts don't have any permissions, so you actually have to assign them to them. The best way that you can assign permissions is not directly to the user account. You want to actually apply an IAM policy. As you can see on the screen here, all these policies in AWS are written in JSON format, and they consist of essentially 3 main pieces. The first piece is the effect. This will say if something is allowed or if it's going to be denied. The second is the action, and the action specifies what a user can do with that AWS service. This is the API call that can be made by that user. And finally, the resource. The resource defines the scope in which the user can perform the action. You might say a specific S3 bucket, for example, or you can use the wildcard, and that means everything. Now let's talk about the recommended way to implement AWS IAM. When you go to implement AWS IAM, it's recommended that you do the following steps. First, you create an IAM group. Second, you create and assign an IAM policy to that group, and users in that group are going to inherit that policy. Finally, you're going to add users to that group. To wrap things up, let's perform a lab with AWS IAM. I hope you're enjoying the content so far. If you are, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe. That way YouTube knows the content is helpful for other people. Also, make sure to check out the description for more resources related to this video. All right, let's get back to the content. In this lab, we're going to create an IAM group. We're going to assign permissions to that group. We're going to create users. Then we're going to add users to that group. So the first thing that I want you to do is go to the search bar when you're logged into an AWS account, and we're going to type IAM. Now you're going to see you have 2 different options. You have IAM, and that's what we're going to use for this. And then you also have IAM Identity Center. We're not going to use that in this particular lab, but just be aware those 2 different options do exist, and they have different use cases of why you would use one over the other. For this lab, again, we're going to use IAM because that's going to deal with user accounts in this specific AWS account. So go ahead and select IAM. So the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to create a group. So you'll see over here on the left, you have user groups, and that's what you're going to go ahead and select. So we'll go ahead and click on that. And you can see there's no groups that currently exist in this AWS account. So we're going to go up here to the top right, and we're going to select Create Group. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is give the user group a name. So we're going to call this Test Group. Now, if you had existing users in your account, you could add them in here in this section. We're not going to do that because we're going to follow the process that AWS recommends with this. But just be aware you could do that right away when you're creating a group. So if we scroll down here, now we see this Attach Permissions Policies section, and this is where we're actually going to select a specific policy. So you can search for specific policies if you want. You can select whatever is on here. It's completely up to you. For this particular lab, we're just going to type in S3 in here, and we're going to select Amazon S3 Full Access. And then we're going to scroll down, and we're going to select Create User Group. Now we've created a group called Test Group, and it has the permissions to access S3. Now we're not going to really go into this particular feature in this video, but there is something called IAM Policy Simulator, where you can actually simulate the policies that you want to apply to groups or users or whatever the case is, so that you can see what's actually being applied. Now, let's say you didn't apply permissions to the group when you created it. If you go back to user groups and then you select your group, you can add permissions in the permissions tab. You would select add permissions and then either attach policies or create inline policies. And if we go in here, you can see you just check whatever you want to add, and then you would select attach policies, and that's going to add those permissions to that group. So for instance, if we selected this AI Ops read-only access, and then we selected attach policies, that is now going to be applied to that group. So now we have S3 full access, and we have that access that we just added. Now let's go ahead and create a few users. So we're going to go here on the left, and we're going to select users. You can see in this account, we don't have any users currently. So we're going to select create user, and we need to give it a username. So we're going to call this test user 1, and we're going to select provide user access to the AWS management console, which is logging into the actual GUI on the web browser. For this, we're not going to use the auto-generated password. We're going to create a custom password. And because we're going to end up deleting this account, we're not going to have this user account reset the password on the first login. Normally, you would do this. You would probably also use the auto-generated password instead of creating your own. But again, this is just for a lab, so we're not going to do that. And then we're going to select next. Now on this screen, you could add this user to that group or to any group that you have. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to go do that after the fact, but just be aware that you could do that when you're creating the user. So we'll select next. And then on this screen, you could add tags if you wanted to do that as well. You can see this permissions summary section would tell us if we were adding permissions to that user. Again, we're not doing that in this particular case, but you would see that here if you were doing that. So we'll hit create user now. And now that user is created, you can see it's going to give a sign-in URL, it gives the username, and it gives the console password that you can use to log in. We'll go ahead and log in with that user. You can see when you log into this user account, this user doesn't have any permissions by default. So if we go to S3 here with the search bar, we're going to see that we don't have access to S3 because we haven't been added to that group. So how do we fix that? Well, if we go back into IAM and we go to user groups, we select our group, so test group, you can see there's no users in this group. So now we'll select add users. We have our test user 1, that's the one we just created, and we're going to hit add users. Okay, so now that user is added to the group, which means it has the permissions that we added before. So this AI Ops read-only access and Amazon S3 full access. Remember that IAM is extremely important in AWS, and it plays a critical role in protecting account access. The more attention that you invest in your IAM structure, the more secure that your AWS environment is going to be. This content is also just the beginning of your IAM learning journey, so I strongly suggest that you do more research on IAM best practices. I hope you enjoyed this content. If so, make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. Are you tired of overpaying for cybersecurity training? Are you interested in training from industry professionals? Are you looking for cybersecurity career services? If you answered yes to any of those questions, then cybertrainingpro.com is the perfect platform for you. At Cyber Training Pro, we're a one-stop shop for all your cybersecurity needs. We can train you for industry certifications or just improve your overall knowledge and skills in a certain area. Unlike other platforms, we don't stop there. We can also coach you throughout your career, practice your interview skills, or create a high-performing resume with our career services. CybertrainingPro.com isn't just another training platform. Students get exclusive access to our private community where we go beyond training courses to provide additional content, tips and tricks, and engagement with both other students and staff. Look, by the year 2025, there could be as many as 3.5 million job openings in cybersecurity. With so much opportunity, why not maximize your career potential with a platform that cares about your success? Come join us at cybertrainingpro.com and start building your future today.